The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Conducting a Facility Security Assessment Without Needing a Security Consultant, presented by our sponsor, Heffernan. We're so happy you can join us. My name is Deb Beto, and I will be your moderator today and be monitoring questions you may have during the session. Before we open up the session, let's review a couple of key items. All of the webinar materials we discuss can be found at the URL currently showing on your screen. I will be sharing this URL in a follow-up email, so don't feel like you need to write it down right now. If you have trouble with your internet connection during the webinar, we recommend leaving the presentation and logging back in. If you have audio difficulties or a telephone line goes dead during the call, hang up and call back again to the same number. If all lines go dead, watch the on-screen chat box for an alternative call-in number. Please feel free to ask questions or provide feedback by using the chat box or questions box during the webinar. If you are using a tablet, you may need to tap on the screen for the options bar to appear, and then you can select the appropriate option. We may not respond immediately, but we will try to work your questions or feedback into the presentation. If we can't get to your comment or question during the session, we will be online afterwards to respond, or we may follow up in an email if we run completely out of time. You may also email us at moderator@aspenrmg.com for up to 48 hours after the webinar. This will be a 1-hour presentation. Questions and comments are very much encouraged throughout, and the presenter will be answering questions at the end. And lastly, we have a number of webinars upcoming covering a variety of topics, including those listed at the Heffernan webinar website. In addition, we offer the mandatory Preventing Harassment training in English 3 times a year. With that, let's begin today's webinar, Conducting a Facility Security Assessment Without Needing a Security Consultant. Our presenter today is Dr. Steve Albrecht. Dr. Steve Albrecht is one of the country's leading experts on workplace violence prevention. In 1994, he co-wrote Ticking Bombs, one of the first books on this subject. And since then, he has continued to write, speak, and train on workplace and school violence, the value of threat assessment teams, and safety and security of all employees. His background includes 15 years with the San Diego Police Department. He holds a doctorate in business administration, an MA in security management, a BS in psychology, and a BA in English. He is board certified in HR, security management, employee coaching, and threat management. He has written 23 books on business, security, and law enforcement subjects. And while we get ready for Dr. Steve to start his presentation, I'd like to start with just 3 polling questions for the audience to participate so that we can kind of get a feel for where you are in your own security assessment. So our first question is, do you have security guards at your facility? So if you can use your polling questions and answer yes, no, or I don't know. And again, if you are using a tablet, you may need to tap on the tablet for these options to appear. And I usually like to get about 80% of the people voting so that we can get a good representation of our audience here. And on this question, Dr. Steve, we have 23% say yes, 77% say no, and nobody doesn't know.
That's a good sign.
Yes. On our next question, have you ever done an active shooter evacuation drill? Again, we're looking for yes, no, or I don't know. And people are responding very quickly today. I really appreciate your doing that, because the sooner you respond, the sooner we get into the meat of the presentation. So on this one, 27% say yes, 71% say no, and 2% say I don't know. And our last polling question here. Has your organization ever had a serious theft problem? Again, yes, no, or I don't know. And people are responding very quickly today. I really appreciate your doing that, because the sooner you respond, the sooner we get into the meat of the presentation. So on this one, 27% say yes, 71% say no, and 2% say I don't know. And our last polling question here. Has your organization ever had a serious theft problem? Again, yes, no, or I don't know. And this is the last polling question, and then I will turn the presentation over to Dr. Steve. All right, so 15% say yes, 70% say no, and 15% say I don't know. Dr. Steve, you're up.
Great. Thanks, Deb, and thanks to the good folks at Aspen Risk Management Group for their support of my efforts, and also the good folks at Heffernan Insurance as well. Had a long relationship with both organizations over the years, and I appreciate the opportunity to come with you today and talk about security for just a little bit. Quick 60 minutes. The good news is I talk quickly. The bad news is I talk quickly. So we will cover a lot of material in a short period of time. The best use of a guy like me who does talk rather rapidly is to download the slides and use them as your guide as to what you want to pull out from our conversation today. I go to a lot of webinars myself, besides all the ones that I teach, a lot of Zoom discussions and whatnot. And what I think is sometimes I look at the slides that the presenter has offered, and I oftentimes can't remember from my notes or what they were talking about at the time. So sometimes the slides can be too basic and not have enough meat on the hoof. I try to provide enough information for you that if all you had 3 months from now was my slide package to actually figure out how to do the security assessment yourself, you'd be fine and you'd have no issues doing it yourself. And we'll talk about what the benefits of doing a security assessment of your facility with your team members or by yourself, what the benefit is as we go forward. Let's talk a little bit about the poll questions and the reason I asked them. As a workplace violence guy, it's my kind of primary background to think about this subject. So one of the questions I ask is about whether you have security guards, and sometimes we look at security guards as a stopgap between what's going on to keep us safe and having to call the police. Certainly these days, as you look around the country, the relationship between the police and public businesses and government businesses is being questioned now. I do a lot of work with libraries, and we're questioning the interaction with the library patrons and staff with the police, and that's an ongoing conversation. So sometimes security guards and security officers, if we have the right ones in place, if we have a qualified, reputable company providing the guards to us and they've had training for those folks, or we have a relationship with you work in county government or city government, if you have a security provider which comes from inside the city or county, we tend to get good results. Where we have the most difficulty with security guards is when they are, underpaid and undertrained and sort of put into positions where they're not prepared for. So if you have a good firm, a lot of the national firms and some of the local firms that really focus on training and experience and support of their security officers can be very helpful to you. If you don't have a good relationship with the security officers in the contract that you have, one key is to sit down with the site manager and say, look, we need better service, better customer service, better security service. And one of the things we'll talk about is what are the posted orders for that particular security company. And they're usually a copy of something which is at each site. And what makes it useful is where you can customize the site posted orders to say, at this particular location, we're a factory, we're an office, we're a high public contact agency, or we're a place where no customers, no clients come in, or lots of vendors come through, truck drivers, things like that. We can specify a group of activities, a group of posted orders for each part of that particular location rather than use the one that's sort of generic for everybody. The second question is about active shooters, a rare possibility certainly, but we have seen, at least before the pandemic, this happening in our country at a startling level. I've been studying this issue since 1992. I've interviewed 3 workplace violence murderers in prison to get their perspective about why they did what they did. So I have a strong concern as I teach active shooter response to organizations, and I try to do it in a low-key way so people aren't frightened to come to work. But we talk about the value, and I want you to think about this from your own organizational perspective, of having a drill at least once a year where we do 2 things. We ask employees to leave the building for 15 minutes, safely, effectively get out of there for 15 minutes, or hide out in some part of the building that they can lock down, a safe room, a place where they could barricade the doors for 15 minutes just to demonstrate the value and the validity of the run, hide, fight concept as it's connected to the issue of the rare possibility of an active shooter in your facility. Obviously, the active shooter situation is more connected to situations that we have high-risk human resources. We have public contact, like taxpayer offices where somebody's quite upset, paying their taxes or fees or fines, that type of thing. And then also in situations where there are high degree of money or nighttime work being done, hospitals, retail establishments, where the run, hide, fight phenomenon is more necessary than it would be for other facilities. But in my perfect world, we would have an opportunity for everybody, like a fire drill, like an earthquake drill, like a tornado drill, to be able to get folks to practice at least once a year this idea of the 15-minute drill. The last question about theft in the organization, I'm glad to hear that we don't have high numbers there. A lot of theft is internal, and a lot of it is shrinkage that happens from unscrupulous, unethical employees. We'll talk a little bit about the protection pieces we need to look at for the facility security assessment as you do it, to make sure that your fiduciary instruments, your cash, your equipment, your high theft items, office supplies, things that have gold etched into them, stuff like that, is being protected in your facilities, warehouses, et cetera. So if you have a low degree of theft in your organization, that's a real positive sign. The more theft I see in organizations, it's usually around two issues. One is there is not the controls we want in place, the fiduciary controls, the surveillance controls, things like that, and also usually an employee with a drug habit, usually an opiate addict. I've had lots of cases with my clients where the person that we catch, stealing from the organization or selling equipment or devices or tools, even proprietary things, lab books and pharmaceutical companies, stuff like that, is usually an opiate addict. So a low degree of theft in your poll questions there is a good sign for me. We want to remain vigilant about it as we go forward. When we think about this concept of assessing your building yourself without needing a security consultant, I'm not taking work away from the starving security consultants out there. I'm just saying we can do these things without them. Many times in my work, I have a sense that sometimes security companies, security aggregators, which are companies that provide a variety of security equipment or services, tend to really go at what they are best at. So if it's a camera company, you need a lot of cameras. And if it's an alarm company, you need a lot of alarms. And if they're a security guard company as well, then you need a lot of security officers. That's not necessarily how we solve the presenting issues that you're facing. You may be able to do a security assessment of your facilities, create a report, and it's a team effort. While we do this, we'll talk about that, so that you can make decisions about anything you need to add or adjust or fix to your current security posture. Now, if you look at the slide, one of the things that we sort of discuss or argue about amongst my colleagues is, how do we reassure that our clients that when we do security assessments, we do it, write a report, that we're not suddenly putting them in a difficult situation. I'm not an attorney, but I work around a lot of attorneys, and one of the things that people who are not attorneys sometimes say is, well, once we do this, once we create this report, suddenly the clock is ticking and we're on notice as to what we have to do. Well, here's the good news. We have a 3-type criteria, which is, what is the cost, what is the culture of our organization, and is it feasible? Those 3 things are important as to whether or not we make changes. Can we afford it on our budget? Is the work culture, will it allow the changes that we're asking for? And what's the cost, and how we're going to pay for it? And is it feasible? So those 3 things are really what we use to temper or monitor the changes that we make going forward. The problem is that some people believe that once we write a report, there is somehow a sense that if we have 100, and we'll call them for this part of the discussion, recommendations as to what to do, and we only do 99 of them, we're going to get sued. That's not exactly true. And here's the other problem, and this is a sort of a pro and a con as well, which is, once we do this, this will increase our liability because we know about potential problems and we should be assessing every single one of them. Well, one, you can't address every single problem all the time. We can address a lot of things that we see on a priority basis. We'll talk about that as we go forward. But you're always, and this is the tough part, but it's a truth, you're always going to have liability if you have a facility where you invite employees, or you invite vendors, or you invite clients or customers or taxpayers or children or the elderly or a disabled population, whoever you deal with, into your facility, you're always going to have 100% liability the first day you open the doors. The only way to defeat that is not be in business. We have business insurance. We have the site security assessment reports to be able to say this is what we are mitigating going forward as we identify and recognize certain things. Not everything that you see needs to be addressed. We don't need a safe for our paper clips, but some things that are hazardous or pretty obvious security risks we need to address right away. We'll talk about how we prioritize those things. So think about this for kind of a second here. I went to a conference once for a group I belong to called ATAP, Association of Threat Assessment Professionals. We had the director of security for Worldwide Disney there, and he said every day Disneyland is open in Anaheim. Every day Disney World is open in Florida. Somebody goes to the hospital. Somebody who is a park patron or occasional employee, but somebody goes to the hospital in an ambulance every day at Disneyland. Statistically, we know this is true because think of the tens of millions of people that go to Disneyland and Disney World, and they stand up and during rides they fall down, they slip and fall on something, they get their arm caught in something, they're overcome by sunstroke or whatever happens to be. Somebody goes to the hospital every day at Disneyland or Disney World. Now, knowing that, they don't shut down Disneyland or Disney World. They just say we have an ambulance service there. We have a police station and a fire station at our Disneyland and Disney World parks, and we have business insurance, and we constantly assess our risk management and safety practices and protocols to make sure we're running the safest theme parks possible. So when you think about knowledge in our discussion here, it is power. It is the things that help us prevent problems and address problems, knowing that we cannot predict the future, knowing that we're not necessarily going to be able to address everything until it happens, because sometimes stuff just happens despite our best intentions. So I always say the same thing. We assess security to get a moment in time, a captured moment in time on paper to say, here's where we are and here's where we could be in terms of improvements, and here's what we will be able to do as our budgets and as our costs and our culture and the feasibility allow. I'll give you an example about culture. Some organizations I work with don't have ID badges. They just don't wear them. And I'm like, okay, we're not going to wear ID badges. It's not part of the culture. Let's find another solution to how we identify employees, or let's create another possibility as to what we might do instead of ID badges. So some things are just not part of the culture. Some things are just not feasible. You say, the building that we are in was built in 1920, and it has, electrical challenges and plumbing challenges and things like that, and it's made out of a certain type of lath and plaster masonry that makes it really difficult to drill holes and pull wire and things like that. Then we have to come up with other solutions. So when you look at what you're able to do, it's time, it's culture, it's feasibility, it's cost, those factors. So look at that last point there. In my reports, and I've learned this the hard way, I don't necessarily call them recommendations. This is not just a haphazard semantic choice. Sometimes when I've talked to my lawyer friends, what they say is the phrase recommendations or the word recommendations somehow suggests that this is what the security consultant has recommended, and if we don't do it, it puts us at risk. I use the phrase options. You have security options because you're driven by choice, and you're driven by the three factors we talked about, and fourth factor would be time, cost, culture, and feasibility. So when I'm writing, this is the lesson for me on these reports and for you as well, when you're writing these types of reports where you assess facility security in your particular environment, use the phrase options, don't use the phrase recommendations. I have done many of these walkthroughs in all kinds of businesses, public and private sector, large aerospace organizations, large government organizations, on down to one-room libraries in small rural communities. So many times I do these things with a partner, and my partner is typically, either if it's one of my security partners, that's fine, but it's typically somebody in the organization who has the knowledge about all the buildings we're looking at. That's usually somebody from facilities. Somebody from facilities is the person who has all the keys and can get into places and say, this is where we keep the IT server, and this is where we have access to the roof, and this is where our phone lines are, and this is where we have our backup power system, or things like that. So when I do the walkthrough, it's almost never by myself, because I want somebody from the organization to accompany me and who knows about the buildings. Sometimes I may take somebody from HR with me If there's a security representative, that's a security, let's say a team leader or a site manager or something like that. I've walked through these facilities with law enforcement. Sometimes we have non-sworn law enforcement members that work for the police department or sheriff as crime prevention officers. They're typically non-sworn civilians. I may bring them with me. Sometimes we may have people from risk management or safety. The safety officer may do the walkthrough with me as well. If I have board members or elected officials, sometimes they may want to walk through and see some things as well that we look at. This may be useful to help get funding and budgets and conversations started about how to pay for certain things that they may not have known about. I may bring or at least talk to certain managers or supervisors or employees along the way. And you say, why would you talk to them? Well, they're in the building all day long. They're the ones that know the ins and outs of the facility. They're the ones that know about how they interact with customers, taxpayers, visitors, vendors, patients, students, whoever it happens to be. So the first thing we figure out is, what does this building do? Second, who operates this building and can get us to all the places we need to see, visually. And then third, who are the stakeholders, the people inside, the safety and security stakeholders? It's risk management, it's HR, it's facilities, but it's also the people that are living and working in those buildings on a regular basis. And I'm a pretty smart guy. I've been doing this for 30 years, but oftentimes I will miss stuff that I see because it doesn't resonate with me because I don't work in the building. I remember I was at a hospital once and we crossed from the parking lot into the hospital facility. And we had to cross this 2-lane road and it didn't seem like that big of a deal. And someone said to me, this is the most dangerous road in town here because people zoom by here during rush hour 2 times a day, where they drive 60 miles an hour past the hospital. It needs a traffic light system here to be able to slow folks down, or speed bumps or something like that. I never would have known that because I started the project at 9 o'clock in the morning, not at 7 o'clock in the morning when rush hour was happening. So many times people can tell you who work in the building that you may not work in exactly what's going on here. And I may talk to security guards, even though they're not, employees of the facility, just to figure out what's going on. Lastly, I try to take some pictures to remind me when I write the report what I need to remember, because sometimes you write stuff down, it doesn't resonate. The photographs will tell you this is a hazard, this is something, sorry, this is something we do well, this is something we need to improve. So the concept I'm talking with you about today is called security in depth. And security in depth is we start at the outside of the facility and we walk around. Think about this at your house. You've locked your keys inside the house, or you've lost your keys, you can't get in. You walk around the outside of your house and say, what's the safest, easiest, least damaging way for me to get inside my house if I don't have a spare key? So when I look at security in depth, I start at the outside and I walk around the parking lot, the exterior of the building. I look at lighting, and there's an issue. Sometimes I may have to come back in the dark. So I'll come back and do my daytime assessment. I'll come back at 8 o'clock at night and sit in the parking lot or walk around the building and see what I see at nighttime as well. Then I go inside the building and I look at everything related to people and policies and equipment and devices and emergency protocols that we have. So start at the outside, walk around and see what you see. You're looking at landscaping, and is there activity of graffiti or vandalism or homelessness, that type of stuff around your facility? What are the neighboring businesses around you that may be problematic? Once you've done the exterior walkthrough, and you can look at doors and access control and how we get in and how we get out, where folks park, things like that, then you can go inside and start to look at the interior of the facility and a complete review of access control, what we use for badging or locks or devices, cameras. Then we start to look at the paper procedures, policies and procedures about evacuation and emergency. Then we start to look at things like how we protect our IT systems, how we protect our employees when it comes to visitors, vendors, clients, customers, people that make regular or irregular access to our facilities. Then we look at how we protect our goods and devices and equipment and things in our warehouses and places like that, office supplies, cash, whatever it happens to be, from external or internal theft. So you can see that there's a process I'm following here, which is structured starting from the outside going to the in. Following the inside, we look at first aid procedures. Where are the first aid kits, the earthquake kits, the AED machines? What do we do to protect our cash, credit, our fiduciary instruments, our financial data, our financial documents, our proprietary information? What kind of responders do we have coming to our facility? PD in the city, sheriffs in the county, ambulance services, fire services. Do we have a security function, and what do they do and how do they do it? As a workplace violence guy, I look at the workplace violence response. Do we have an active shooter drilled that we talked about? Have folks been exposed to the concept in any type of training? Then I look at where we are for emergency drills and practices related to earthquakes, weather, fire, things like that on a once yearly basis. Then we write a report. It can be a group project. You can drive it yourself, or it can be done collectively where certain people write different things that they may have expertise in. Sorry, I always try to get the folks from finance or IT or those types of services to contribute their expertise for areas that I'm not necessarily that familiar with on how the business operates. HR may be able to provide a lot about how we do employee discipline and termination, what we recover from disciplined or terminated or retiring or leaving employees, that type of thing. So go to those subject matter experts, go to those department directors or their assignees and get the information that we need for the report. Then we figure out how to implement the report over a span of time, and maybe 3 months, 6 months, or a year, to implement the changes that we suggest in the report, the options that we're talking about. And then we continuously follow up. And that's where we really look at the liability piece and say, not only have we done the assessment, but we're trying to fine tune this on a regular basis. We're making progress every single day. We're making progress after things happen, before things happen. We're making progress based on knowledge that we have captured this moment in time as we look at our facility. So let's start on the security in depth concept. Let's look outside and go in. Walking the exterior of the building, what's your impression of the exterior? Walking the parking lots, looking at the lighting, trash, broken glass, graffiti, stuff around the outside of the facility that is a landscaping issue. Are there any hazards like exposed pipes or sprinkler heads or things like that? Is there a homeless issue nearby? We have problematic businesses nearby. I would define those as liquor stores, check cashing stores, pawn shops, places like that, where sometimes the clientele can spill over to our neighborhood. What do the area crime rates look like? Very low, very high, middle of the range. You can get that from your county sheriff's department or oftentimes the website for your city or your county. Is there any neighborhood spillover issues? You have a high school near your facility, you have a junior high near your facility, you have a county jail near your facility. Lots of things may spill over towards your business depending on what kind of neighborhood you're in. Then we look at how the facility is at nighttime, parking lots, exterior lights for stairwells, parking garages, elevators, things like that we need to look at nighttime. Do we have oftentimes the right exterior cameras in place that are supported by lights that work at nighttime? That typically calls for infrared cameras that take pictures at night. Do our doors for the entire facility close and lock? Do we have any door hardware issues, any hinge issues, exterior hinges? Do we have any problems with broken parts of our access control, things like doors and warehouse doors, stuff like that? As you go around the facility, you'll typically find things connected to the utilities. Where's our telephone room? Where's our gas shutoffs visible? Is there anything that needs to be secured as a utility panel, electric, gas, that type of thing? Sorry. Then we have to look at the exterior in terms of things like bollards, which protect our front doors from being crashed through by a car. Do we have the right kind of fencing? Is it chain link fence? Is it no fencing? How about signage? Can you see the address for your facility from the street? Can you, is there a possibility the address is painted on the roof for the police response by helicopter, stuff like that? Do we have security guards? What types of barriers do we have in our parking lots, speed bumps, things like that? All part of the security assessment from the exterior of the facility. So if real estate's all about location, 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 then security is all about access control. And so I eat, sleep, and breathe access control. I believe in locks. I believe in key cards. I like people being on one side of the facility and keeping folks on the other side that need to be there, whether it's taxpayers, visitors, vendors, et cetera. Something to think about when you look at your own facility. Do you own the building? Are you a part of a landlord-tenant situation where the landlord does not let you make any changes without permission? That's the usual deal. Do we have multiple tenants where your company is in part of the building and there's also a similar company or another company that does something different than what you do also inside the facility? Do you have shared use in terms of the access? Everybody comes into your building through a main reception area and they get directed to your particular location or another location. Is it like that? How do we use access control with key card readers. If you have hard keys with employees, we don't have very good key control, we know. You also parenthetically need a policy that says any employee who loses their hard keys must report that to you within 24 hours. Employees are sometimes embarrassed by this. They're afraid they're going to get fired. The cost of rekeying the building is expensive, so they don't want to tell anybody, but you must have a policy that says, look, if you lose hard keys to our building, you must tell us within 24 hours so that we can address the issue. Now, sometimes employees find their keys within that 24-hour time span, but I like to have that policy written in. Same as key card readers. Again, if they're not working, they're broken. If their employees lose their keys, we need somebody from security or HR to take them out of the system and get it back up to speed. Do we have unsecured public areas where the public waits? Is it a lobby area? Is this lobby staffed with a receptionist or a security guard, or is it empty? Do employees come and go through different doors as visitors or other folks? Do they come in through the same doors? Are there exterior cameras that capture when people come into our building? Are there interior cameras in the reception area that capture people inside our lobby? Look at your loading docks. Look at your warehouse parts of your facility. Are those things secure? I many times see trucks backed up into loading docks, and then they will keep the loading dock doors open because of the tight fit between the truck, the back of the truck and the loading door, and then the bad guy cuts a hole in the truck and comes inside the warehouse that way. So I like loading dock doors that are pulled down and locked even when the trucks are backed up into this space. Can you get access to the roof of your facility? Is it easy? There's a ladder on the side of the building, or it's not easy. You have to figure out, without climbing necessarily on the roof, how people might get onto the roof. You have burglar alarms for your facility. Some people do. You have fire alarms for your facility or sprinkler system. That's another thing to note. And then do you have panic alarms? Panic alarms at the reception desks, panic alarms at key counters for those types of more challenging patrons or taxpayers or people that come in that are angry, have to pay bills, fines, fees, something like that. And then, do you have a Knox box? Sorry. It's not COVID, it's seasonal allergies, thankfully. A Knox box is a device that is mounted by the fire department on the outside of the building. It is a box that has hard keys and electronic access control keys inside that the fire department can open up with their own key. This prevents them from smashing down your doors if they have to come in after hours. So a Knox box would be typically installed at your front location. The fire department knows how to do that, and you can talk to them about it. When you think about policies and procedures, it's an important part of our security discussion to say, what have we created? What is the HR policies, and how do we have that captured in our procedure manual for what employees give to us when they leave? Badges and keys and hard keys and key cards, we log them off of our network, things like that. So those protocols need to be well established and written down. Speaking of HR, one of the policies that I frequently ask HR to create, well, two actually. One is a locker policy. If you have lockers for your employees, there should be a policy which is well defined that they're not allowed to bring contraband or weapons or firearms or explosives, fireworks, stuff like that into our building and store them in their lockers. And then the other thing is there's no expectation of privacy. We can search the lockers because we use our locks, which we give to them. We search these lockers looking for only contraband, not people's medications or personal things, but there needs to be a locker policy. And the second is, I would like to see, and we'll talk about this in the work-based violence piece, a policy about domestic violence response by the organization. If an employee comes to us and says, I have a domestic violence issue and I'm worried that my ex-boyfriend or ex-husband is going to show up here, that we have a protocol to follow to help protect the employee. Those who in California are under a mandate called Senate Bill 400, where that mandate says not only do we have to support the employee, we have to create a safety plan for him or her, and we cannot fire that employee based on being a domestic violence victim. So we want to see policies and written policies connected to access control, visitor control, how visitors sign in and out if they need to, vendor escorts, where do vendors wait if they have to, truck drivers, people like that. Who has the alarm codes? Is it the employees? Is it only key employees? Is it the landscapers? Is it the janitors that are a contractor, that type of thing? What is our policy for allowing people to work after hours inside our facility? What do we have in terms of access control where certain employees can only get to certain rooms or buildings or parts of the building with certain kinds of graduated key cards? Do we have evacuation maps posted in our hallways? Do we have policies about fire evacuation? Do we have a floor warden system? If we have multiple floors, do we have people in charge of our earthquake kits? Do we have people in charge of how we shelter folks in place if we need to for weather-related issues? Certainly wildfires are a concern as well in California right now, and active shooters we talked about at the start of our conversation. So my kind of weakest area when it comes to security, and I belong to a group called ASIS, the American Society for Industrial Security, and I hold a designation called CPP, Certified Protection Professional, which I've had for almost 25 years, is IT. So I rely on my IT professionals to give me their sense of what software, hardware changes we need to make to protect our organization from ransomware, from hacking, from all types of things that come from employees not being great with their passwords, stuff like that. So I don't have a lot of expertise in this area, so I go back to them and say, okay, can you give a report that I can attach to my report that says, here's what we're doing, or here's what we could be doing, here's what we need to do to fully protect our physical server rooms. And one of the things I do in server rooms is I put a camera system outside the server room that captures who is coming inside the server room. I also have a sign-in procedure inside the server room that says, anytime you come in here, even if it's to pick up a box, you need to sign in and sign out so we know exactly who came in and it matches what we see on the video. Think of your organization. Think of what happens in your organization if your IT system went down. One of my clients was a company that made uniforms for high schools and colleges. Their most important room in their entire facility was the telephone room. They had an 800 number, which rang off the hook for about a 4-month span of time, and then they filled the orders the other 8 months in their system. If something happened to their telephone room, if something happened to their servers for their telephones, they would be out of business. So think of those rooms that you have in your facility that are IT related, server rooms, places where we store old computers, stuff like that. Those need to be fully protected. We also need in those rooms as well, what is the fire control system? So we look at a lot of IT server rooms and we have, it used to be Halon gas systems, now it's a different system. What do we have in terms of protecting for fire? Not only good air conditioning system into those rooms for the cooling necessities, but also fire control. Do you have a PA system? And can IT access the PA system? Can IT access your cameras? And here we get into an issue where sometimes the keeper of the keys are the only ones. I had a client is a healthcare organization, and the only people that could get access to the camera system was IT. And the IT manager was not working that day when they had a child in a code pink situation where the child had run away or was kidnapped, or I forget what it was, but it was a pretty heavy duty situation. We couldn't get access to the camera system because the only guy that had the passwords to the cameras was the IT manager. So PA systems, camera systems, again, maybe facilitated by IT, but other people need to get into those things as well. Last one there, think about your policies and procedures for shredders and how you use what is sent off-site in terms of backup tapes or up to the cloud, and what things are kept hard copy, especially HR stuff, which needs to be kept under lock and key. So if you have a facility which is visited by taxpayers, visitors, clients, customers, vendors, you need a response to that in terms of the security procedures. I like to create a red book, or what you might call an icebox. Icebox is in case of emergency, ICE, for the front desk. It has emergency telephone numbers in the box. It has call trees. It has building plans you could give to the cops or the firefighters. It has evacuation procedures. The red book is something the receptionist could pull out. It has a laminated card in it with telephone numbers of all the key facilities, security, HR, senior management, whatever it happens to be that he or she can call as necessary. What is your badging or escort procedures for visitors? Do they wait in some place after they've done their work to be paid or collect things or whatever they need to do? Just think about this. As an example, I bought a used UPS outfit at a garage sale once. The shorts and the hat and the shirt, all the brown and gold. I could put the UPS outfit on. I don't have the legs for it anymore. I used to when I was a weightlifter. But I could walk around with my UPS outfit on in most businesses in the United States and not be stopped. If I was pushing a hand truck and carrying a clipboard and wearing a UPS outfit, which I got at a garage sale, which is a little scary, I would not be stopped. think of your organization and say, we have a protocol for everybody. FedEx delivery people, guy that fills the soda machine, cleans the copy machine, whatever happens to be, we have a protocol for these people. Janitorial has a protocol, landscaping has a protocol, how we collect mail and packages, maintenance, third-party maintenance providers, they have to follow our protocols when it comes to entry, escort, storage, wherever it happens to be. Okay, almost done. Halfway to done. More than halfway to done. Think about the things in your facility, and if you run a business where you don't have a lot of assets stored in a warehouse, what are the things most likely to be stolen? Tablets, laptops, projectors, TVs, flat screens. Do you have things that are recyclable that could be stolen? Do you have an office supply collection, which is like Staples or something, where you have a ton of laser toner, and which is very expensive, and printer supplies, ink? Think about ink is like $38 a pint or something, very expensive. Do you have software or hardware, computers stored in places, postage meters, copy machines, tools or office equipment, pallet jacks, things that are inside your warehouse that are expensive, trucks, forklifts, things like that? Those all need to be captured as assets that we have, and we need inventory tags on them, and we need better protection for those types of things, especially if you're having stuff delivered. What is your inventory control process? Again, like IT, that's not my strongest area. I typically partner with the warehouse people and say, what is our process for how we get stuff delivered to us and it's shipped out? What things we keep in a cage? What things are theft sensitive items that we are most concerned about protecting? Who has the keys to those things? And we look at security incident reports connected to theft and say, what do we need to do based on what has happened previously? Low theft issue, not a lot of hard objects to be stolen, less of a concern. High theft issue, expensive stuff in a warehouse or expensive stuff in the facility needs to be protected. Sorry. We think about first aid only typically after an emergency. I like to know where the AED machines are, and I have a kind of a pet peeve about AED machines. I think sometimes we cut corners when it comes to AED training. We will put certain employees through AED training and say, okay, we have these 6 people who are trained, and those folks are on vacation all at the same time when we need an AED machine. In my perfect world, and I'm always a security guy, in my perfect world, we would have first aid training, voluntary for all employees that want it, and then AED training for those employees that want it as well. You can get that through the Red Cross and other providers, where we could get AED training for folks if we have AED machines. Tourniquets is another huge issue here. We've seen this a lot after active shooter situations. There's something called the Hartford Protocol, which came out as a result of the Sandy Hook Elementary shootings, where too many children died because we didn't have tourniquet training. There's a program that you can get from your local hospital called Stop the Bleed. I did it when I was in Colorado, and I've done it here in Missouri as well. It's a 1-hour program, teaches folks how to use tourniquets. They are very effective in saving people's lives for any type of injury that involves blood loss. Look at your CPR training, look at your AED training, look at your tourniquet training, review your first aid and injury reporting forms. This is an OSHA factor as well. Remind employees they may need to dial 911 versus 911. Some phone systems you have to dial 9 to get an outside line. And lastly, if you have any type of public contact with people who are potential opioid users, this is my libraries, this is my public health facilities and things like that, you may want to provide voluntary training to employees on Narcan, which is a nasal spray that we give to people that are opiate overdosers. So I've done lots of Narcan training for my libraries because these folks tend to go to libraries to do their drug business. Again, fiduciary instrument controls. You're going to want to probably meet with the finance directors and managers that say, here's our vaults and safes and drop boxes. Here's how we move the cash from the counter where we collect it from the customer to a more secure location where it's counted and stored. I'm a big believer in armored cars. I use armored cars a lot with my clients, even if they have a small amount of money. I use armored cars when I have church clients. I say on Monday morning, we're going to have the armored car come into the facility and collect the money from Sunday's services, which is much better than having an employee take it to the bank himself or herself for the usual safety reasons there. So what is your review assessment of how we collect the financial information, financial actual instruments? Do we have blank checks, what's our deposits and our bank deposit process, things like that, where you look at our vault safes. Do we change the combination on a regular basis? Again, what are our fiduciary instrument controls? So if everything's done electronically, that's great. If some stuff is done electronically and some is done by hard cash and other things like that, then you have to have not only collection processes, but internal audit procedures to make sure that things are going where they want to. You know as well as me when people say it's not about the money, it's about the money. Look at your location and say, who is our fire department? Who is our police department? You may have a sheriff's department for some locations that you have. If you have multiple sites that they're county oriented, you may have state police where you are. If they're county oriented and sheriffs are not handling that contract, you may have local city police depending on what type of location you have. So think about the non-emergency numbers that your employees can put into their cell phones. They may have questions. They can call the PD or the sheriff themselves on a non-emergency basis. Otherwise, it's 911 or 911 and make sure we know which one is which. You may, depending on the location of your facility and what you do and how you do it, sorry, you may want to meet with police personnel or fire personnel, typically the fire marshal, and talk about things in terms of drills or after action situations that you've seen in other locations as it pertains to your facility. Again, in my perfect world, the building address would be visible from outer space. When I was a cop, I went to lots of places where I couldn't figure out where the building address was because it was architecturally not pretty enough to put on the side of the bloody building. I couldn't figure out where I was half the time. So make sure your building addresses are visible and can be seen from first responders, especially from the street as they approach. So let's talk a little bit about security officers. Again, I'm a fan of security guards that have training before they get to you. I'm a fan of security guards that are paid a little bit more than the other folks so that we get a higher caliber of officer. I'm also a fan of posted orders which are customized and written for each location. They don't just say, okay, you're going to this factory, here's the posted orders for a factory. Or you're going to a office where folks work inside on computers all day, here's the posted orders for that. What we want is a set of posted orders for each position, and it could be different from one side of the building to the other. You know, the reception area is different than the warehouse area as what we want this person to do. And in my perfect world, the site contractor, the guard contractor would update the posted orders and show up and not just worry about being paid and how many officers we can get in and how many hours we can bill to the client. But can they create a set of posted orders that people can actually customize and create for that particular location that they're in? So do guards respond to burglar alarms or open doors? Do they have a service or a reception function? Do they respond to medical issues? Do they respond to behavioral problems like we might see at a clinic or a hospital or something like that? Or do they not? And what kind of equipment are they carrying? They have keys or key cards. They have radios that go to their own dispatcher or radios that the employees can reach them at certain locations like the reception desk. Are they expected to make rounds and punch a time clock that proves that they were there? All things to put into your report. Workplace violence response, again, a couple really good videos on YouTube. The standard run, hide, fight video done by the Department of Homeland Security in the city of Houston, Texas is fine. But I like the one that's even better that's done by the California State University system. It's a cartoon, it's an animation. If you pull it up, it has a white background. It's about 8 minutes long. Go to YouTube, put in Cal State University run, hide, fight video. That's the one I typically show to a lot of my employee groups and training because I think it's a really strong one, even better than the Homeland Security one. Does your organization have employee assistance program or EAP provider? Have you provided workplace violence training for new employees? Do we have a domestic violence response to any employee who comes to us and says, I'm having a DV issue, I need some help, without punishing them, without firing them, but is protecting them as best we can? Do we have a response to temporary restraining orders that are brought to our attention by employees? Do you have weapons laws in your state that have changed? Lots of states, including mine, you can have a concealed weapon without a permit. Lots of states have much more restrictive things. Do we have policies in our procedure manual about employees not bringing firearms into the workplace? Do you need a threat assessment team based on the type of work that you do and the types of people you serve and the employees that you have? That's a possibility as well. And again, we don't designate safe rooms, but we create rooms that employees can go to that have had upgraded hardware and upgraded door locks and things like that where they can shelter in place in the rare possibility of a run, hide, fight situation. Again, we talked about the value of drills. I would like a once a year drill for the usual things, which is fire, weather, and active shooter. I don't always get the active shooter one because sometimes senior management doesn't want to go through it. But we tell people about these drills. We don't surprise them. We tell them it's coming, so we don't terrorize people. And we do drills, and then we debrief afterwards. Do we have code words, or can we create code words in our report that says for our PA system, we can have announcements like they have in a hospital, code red, code blue, code black, code silver, code gray. Those things may be useful for us to have a set of PA announcements which we've trained all employees to use. Okay, you've gathered all the material. You've written down when you did the assessment and who was with you. You have an executive summary, which I typically do, which is, could be 3 or 4 pages. If they don't read the whole report, and the executive summary will be enough to say, here's what we have found, and we kind of prioritize things based on the highest need. It's difficult to prioritize everything, but some stuff you say this needs to be changed immediately, and these things need to be changed once we come up with we can afford it with the cost, the feasibility, and the culture. I'll give an example of something that needs to be changed immediately. Fake cameras. Sometimes people put fake cameras in a lobby system because they don't want to put a real one in there. Those are high liability devices. Take them out immediately. What did you figure out on the exterior of the building? What have you figured out on the interior of the building? What have you figured out in terms of policies, training, risks, targets, threats, security improvement suggestions that you give as the creator of the report that are vendor neutral? That's not saying that we have to use this company or not, but we need a good fencing company, we need a good camera company, or we need a good alarm company. We can put that stuff out to bid as necessity. Now, one of the things I like to do with the report is send it first to our company lawyer or our agency lawyer. You have county counsel, you have city attorney, you have an agency attorney, you have a private sector lawyer that provides legal services to your organization. Send it with a mark of confidentiality to your attorney first. Then they will create a set of reports that they can distribute to other people that you want, limited circulation, so we keep it within the attorney-client privilege. It's a work product. It's not subject to subpoena or review by outsiders. So you may want to meet with the department heads. You may want to meet with managers and supervisors. Keep your copies on a need-to-have basis, and make sure that you address employee or any union concerns. If you have union representatives or employee safety committee, that we brief them on the report. And not everybody has to get the entire report. Some people can get just their particular department. Let's say, the finance department only gets the finance part of the report, and we have review by employee safety committee or council to make sure that they will be able to implement these things, and we talk about it. One of the things that we see in the reporting process is employees may contribute a lot of knowledge to the report creation, and then they never hear about what happened. Well, what are we going to do, or what's different, or what changes are we going to make, or how are we going to address the thing that we told you about? It can be very frustrating to them to say, hey, I spent 20 minutes talking with you about this access control issue and nothing ever changed. So the important thing is to say, here's what we are doing, here's what we're going to do, here's what we will do, and we keep people apprised on some security measures we need to keep to ourselves because they're secret to the organization's leaders. We don't give out the key code to the CEO's office to everybody, but some things we want to share with other people that are not secret and say, here's what we're going to do to protect our facility as best as we can. One of my biggest pet peeves about my work in these types of projects is I write a really awesome report and it dies on the shelf. People say, yeah, we're going to get around to that next year, and then 2 years go by. I have a client that just told me they want me to redo a report I wrote for them 13 years ago. It's a little depressing because they've not taken much of what I talked about and put it into implementation. Have a stakeholder team, a safety and security stakeholder team, and set deadlines and say, here's what we need to do in the next 30 days. Here's what we need to do in the next 90 days, 6 months, and then at 1 year, are we doing most of the things in this report? Do we need to assess other parts of the facility because things have changed and there are new incidents that have come to our attention, including national incidents? And are we looking at these things within the big three, actually the big four if you include time, cost, culture, feasibility? Can we afford it? Does it fit into our culture to make these security changes, whether it's policy or equipment or how we do business? And is it feasible in our business? Is it feasible for us to do these things in our business? With that, back over to Deb. Thanks everybody for your time and attention. Happy to share any questions or comments in the chat piece if you have them.
Excellent presentation, Dr. Steve. Thank you very much. We haven't seen any questions yet. So I think you did a very thorough job on your presentation. If anybody has any questions that they want to ask, go ahead and put those in your questions box now. Otherwise, I would like to thank you for attending today's webinar presented by Heffernan. We will send information by email with instructions on how to access a copy of the presentation on our website. And thank you, Dr. Steve Albrecht, for your time and expertise today.
Thanks, Deb.
We hope all of our attendees found today's webinar to be a valuable use of your time, and be sure to join us next year for our 2021 webinar series. Thank you, everyone, and have a very safe day.